The Georgian winemaking is going through a renaissance. Ancient traditions are being revived. More and more attention is being paid to quality. Georgian wine is becoming recognized not only in the former Soviet Union but also in international markets. I'm Vladimir Nonyants, and today we are going to plunge into an indescribable atmosphere of the Georgian winemaking, where the history itself teaches us how to make money.
Georgian wine is extremely dangerous. Everything starts with a harmless glass and leads to the study of the Georgian language and moving to live in Tbilisi. This, of course, is a joke, but there is some truth in it as well. Namely, the history of local winemaking is measured by centuries and even millennia and can rightly be considered the hallmark of Georgia. Saperavi, Tsinandali, Akhasheni, Kindzmarauli, Mukuzani, Rkatsiteli, Twishi, Tetra. Varieties and sorts of Georgian wine can be listed for a long time, while talks about their original features can last even longer. Wine in Georgia is not just a drink, and winemaking is not just the activity. It is an art, cultural heritage transmitted from generation to generation. In different regions of small Georgia, wine is produced in different ways, in their own way, but always with love.
There is no other winemaking technology in the world. There are the Georgian, European ones, and naturalism, which is so much in trend nowadays. I think those winemakers who follow their principles should be assisted and supported. They try not to break the rules and traditions that were initiated 8,000 years ago, thanks to whom Georgia is going to occupy its deserved place on the world market.
Wine is an integral part of Georgian culture. Even 8,000 years ago, the country began to push Qvevri wine, and this tradition is still maintained nowadays. And in 2013, this method was given the status of a monument of the intangible cultural heritage. It is noteworthy that this special technology had been forgotten for some time. However, its active popularization is happening today. One of the first places where the technology has been revived is Alaverdi Monastery in Kakheti. With the support of investors, state and parishioners, Marani has been restored and the process of making wine in Qvevri established, in a stage of which the monks were involved.
When we talk about the process of winemaking, you need to consider how it is prepared. When it comes to Qvevri, in this case, a whole wine is being used, fruit and bones from the branches. The entire mixture is placed in Qvevri, then begins a natural process of fermentation. I want to emphasize that the grapes of unknown origin never gets in our wine. We use our own crop or harvest of our parishioners. After crush, the grapes does not need additional supplements. We get high-quality wine from the grapes of our Lord. Fermentation occurs naturally. Our wines are 100% real, without impurities of other varieties. We produce 6 different types of wine. After completion of the fermentation process, we fill Qvevri and leave the wine until spring, when the process opening Qvevri starts, which is characterized by a festive mood and certain excitement. From Qvevri we just pour the wine without cha-cha. The wine transfused into new Qvevri must be insisted to be ready, after which it is bottled. In wintertime, while the wine is brewed in Qvevri, it is time to think about God, the time of prayer.
Each monastery in Georgia has Marani. The process of making wine is associated not only with the physical and intellectual effort, but with lots of stress. One maker can face danger at every stage of the production of wine. Some luck is needed here also, because, for example, the hail can destroy the entire crop. The monks put their trust in God's mercy. They are sure that the quality of wine depends not only on their zeal and love towards winemaking, but also on the will of the Lord. And so they accompany the process of harvesting, fermentation and infusion of wine with prayers.
I always remember the case when Catholicos Patriarch of all Georgia, His Holiness and Beatitud, was here in our monastery. Out of respect, we opened query. This took place in 2012. President of Georgia arrived together with Patriarchs then, and Morani was full of guests. Of course, we opened query for the Patriarch, happy that we can treat him with the most valuable 3-year wine. I was very nervous, didn't know what it would be. While we were taking ground off the query, there was a total silence in Morani. The first thing I then heard was the voice of our master David, who asked me to bring there some light. When query had been lightened up, I poured the wine into the glass. It was gold in the light. I presented it to His Holiness and he blessed us. I remember how President said that he understood why his wine didn't work that way. Someone asked for clarification, to which he replied that it was due to the lack of prayer. Then the Patriarch turned to him and said, "Did not you really know about this until now? Prayer has a great power and grace. Everything starts and ends with it. The quality of our wines is mostly due to the grace of God."
But the popularization of Georgian wine on the international market and its promotion to the masses is under the relevant departments. The National Agency of Wine is mainly engaged in it. According to experts, in recent years, local winemakers set proper priorities, focusing on quality and stopped focusing on the quantity, especially after the introduction of Russian embargo in 2006. Georgia then had to look for the new market in the old world.
We've been doing marketing of Georgian wine for about 3 years now. We identified the main markets for the Georgian wines, which are, besides ex-Soviet countries, United States, China, UK and Poland, and also some countries from the Baltic states as well. But our main goal is to increase the markets, increase the export in the non-traditional markets, and we allocated now US and China for next 2016. So we'll be pushing that markets all the way through. So we need an increase, but despite we are having the decrease in our traditional markets like Russia and Ukraine, these markets are growing, but still we are not able to catch them up because the figures in Russia is really huge, and about 50% of all our exports still goes to Russia. So that's why we need to work on establishing Georgian wines outside of the Russian space.
According to experts, increase in sales of the Georgian wine abroad will help to popularize Georgia as a wine tourist country. And this is only a part of the positive effect. Wine tourism will attract more visitors from abroad, extend the local culture to the masses, make the country more recognizable and interesting in the long run to get substantial revenue, because Georgia is first and foremost a tourist country with its huge potential in this area. The experts urge the masses to promote the full package of features specific to Georgia, and it is a tradition to hospitality, cultural values, and other national features.
I believe for the European and Anglophone community, so Americans, English, Australians, Canadians, New Zealanders, there's a great potential for Georgia. Number one, it has something that's built into the country, and that's this incredible level of hospitality that's natural for Georgians, this concept of how Georgians receive guests. So this is a starting point for marketing, is the hospitality that's already in the culture. As for wine, wine tourism worldwide is still a growing industry. So we have to think about different markets and what they want. So New World wine tourism market is a little bit different than Old World. So since we're in Georgia, which is the oldest wine country in the world, this is something you can play to the benefit of for marketing. So focusing on Qvevri, traditional winemaking, visiting traditional producers, the fact that you have a traditional producer at a monastery and they've been making wine for 1,000 years. These are all selling points. I think the selling point that they should focus on here for wine tourism specifically is focusing on tradition rather than just the wine.
Georgia will have a chance to widely demonstrate its hospitality next September as part of the first international conference of wine tourism initiated by the UNWTO, the National Administration of Tourism in Georgia, and the London Exhibition of International Tourism. The representatives of more than 250 countries will be present, including the ministers from 20 states. It should be noted that the UNWTO is holding such a conference for the first time. In Georgia, this event is considered of great significance and is hoped to have impressive results. The wine experts we happened to meet in the course of our little investigation state that the start of the year of 2000 can be considered the 0 point of the newest history of the Georgian winemaking. It has been completely rehabilitated during the last decade after the Gorbachev genocide and the post-Soviet homemade drinks of a doubtful value. Besides, the Russian embargo also has its positive effect, strange as it may seem, since the local winemakers had to turn to the refined European market managed by the French and the Italians. It was a great ambition to fulfill.
In search of the Georgian wine, we have arrived in Koheti. Behind me is the Alaverdi monastery. It produces the real Georgian wine by ancient technology, quarry. Let's talk about the problems of the Georgian winemaking and its prospects with the abbot of the monastery, the Lord David.
С настоятелем монастыря владыкой Давидом. Здравствуйте, Владыка Давид, большое спасибо.
Hello, Lord David. Thank you for agreeing to accept us. The history of the Georgian winemaking is more than 8,000 years. Tell me, please, what should be done in order not to lose what we have achieved so far and that the Georgian wine appear on the world market with all its history and quality? What problems does the Georgian winemaking have?
Сделайте, какие проблемы сейчас есть у грузинского виноделия?
Hello, Georgia is truly a country with ancient wine culture. It is also called the cradle of winemaking. This long period was due to the cultural life of our heritage history, which is typical for the densely populated country. Many scientists agree that the Georgian tribes lived in the area since ancient times. After the birth of Christ, this culture developed its scientific part, which later emerged as the most ancient winemaking technology in quarry, large clay jugs. This technology was only in our country. In addition, our wine in the percentage of underrepresented in the world market has its numerous reasons. I'm not going to list them, but will note the main one. This is the rum policy in the wine industry, which took more than a decade. This led to the fact that our wine is no longer meet the standards of quality and standards due to its long history. As a result, the wine did not get to the global market in the form in which it is known to those who study it. People consume wine and people choose a product that is well known to them. They trust it. Probably for decades, the objective information about Georgian wine has not been provided, which led to the present attitude towards it.
Вот вы упомянули о технологии Квеври. Эта технология была...
You have mentioned that quarry technology, which had been included in UNESCO list of non-material heritage. Tell me, please, can it assist the development of the Georgian wine regarding its awareness on the world market? As far as I know, this technology has already been used in Europe. What is being done now in order to promote Georgian wine worldwide?
Вино на мировых рынках.
Ამის რეცეპტი ძალიან დიდი ფურცელზე
This recipe would require a detailed description on a huge sheet of paper, but the oldest method that has been recognized by UNESCO in 2013 as a monument of intangible heritage in need of a special scientific professional approach, not only in terms of profit. After recognition from UNESCO, the government is making some steps in this direction. To give an example, in Telavi district, in the village of Ikalto, near the famous ancient monastery Ikalto, a school of quarry is being built. There will not be only workshops where one will learn how to make a quarry. It will be a cultural and scientific center where people of all ages, our fellow countrymen and guests, will learn about the most ancient historical culture which our country has carried to date. We must explore all artifacts, all archaeological finds, pottery, must be analyzed to find out how our ancestors thousands of years ago produced quarry, on what technology they created them. Our school academy also includes certification, the description of raw materials used to make pottery. Young people should meet and talk with representatives of the scientific world, which in turn will have to provide them with this culture. It is also important for us that the ancient monastery of Ikolto, where one might say once the wine academy was settled, should be revived as a monastery, a museum, a place where representatives of any social class, believers and unbelievers, could trace its long and rich history. The country needs a different angle to look at our history, adapt to modern realities, and this requires a joint effort of experts from many fields. From this perspective, the state probably should take care of the certification of the vineyards, the production of all variety of sorts, about how to offer wine for the local and international markets. The state should take care of the development of wine tourism, which does not only involve examination of cellars, Marani. Guests must understand that Georgia is a country of ancient culture. This is a way to show who we were, who we are today, and who we want to be in future. This problem can be solved by the joint work of the state with scientists, the business sector, and what is important, with the clergy.
სასულიერო ნაწილთან ერთობლივად ზრუნვა და ფიქრი ამ ამოცანის სწორად გადაწყვეტისათვის.
Вот конкретно вы и ваш монастырь вы сделали.
Personally, you and your monastery have done a lot for the promotion of the Georgian wine, to revive quarry traditions. Is this the single occasion, or can we witness the revival of the ancient technology in Georgia?
Как вообще обстоят дела в этом направлении?
მონასტრების როლი ზოგადად
The role of monasteries in the cultural development of nations is incredibly high. There was a time when calligraphers wrote treatises, books and texts of scripture on the parchment, expensive and rare materials. This activity has been available for a very narrow circle of people. People who were engaged in it required a special talent, intelligence and opportunity. Inside the monastery there was assembled a great resource of intellectual and practical knowledge. In Georgia, the monastery complex has always been a source of knowledge. And if today the monastery is to be a revival of the nation and to transfer the knowledge, the authorities will need a lot of effort to promote it. In addition to the words and deeds, our age speaks for itself. Our monastery is of the 6th century, and this story is even more compelling in a country called the cradle of winemaking. Morani and our small economy send messages to all those interested. We respect our traditions, history, and we are quite friendly with science, without which it is impossible to resurrect the history. Monasteries today, yesterday and tomorrow are going to be the link which is intended to reunite the past, the present and the future. This unity of space and time tells us more about the heritage that our country possesses. We export our wine in some countries in very small quantities, at best a little more than 500 bottles, at least 60-70. We prefer quality to quantity. Wine made in our monastery goes only to those countries which appreciate this drink: the UK, France, Japan. Our wines have fans there. I cannot say how much, we do not conduct calculations, but it has already appreciated by many people actively consuming the drink. The old world is tired of its almost identical products. From this point of view, they like the special taste of Georgian wine prepared in quarry. With God's help, the tradition revived in Alaverdi monastery has brought us very positive results. We set up a fund of the traditional Georgian wine founded by the bishops and metropolitans. In other churches, dioceses, monasteries, there is a very strong desire of revival of monastic winemaking. It's not easy to accomplish it. Some financial and scientific support is needed. Several years ago, it could be a single case today. But in several dioceses, they already produce monastic wine, and the most important is the desire to cover the entire territory of our country. Wine is produced in Kartli in a tiny gorge. Church brings its attitude of the traditional winemaking to the hearts of its parishioners, to the nation. We believe that the desire of rebirth occurs in many people, but it is going to set the tone for the monasteries and churches. With regard to our museum reserve, the same can be observed in many other monasteries as well. We proceeded from the famous ancient Eleverdi monastery, which is visited by a lot of people, both local and tourists. First of all, we would like to remind our fellow countrymen and to explain that in Georgia there are 525 different local grape varieties, where 86 species are from eastern Georgia and the rest from Kartli varieties. We put 104 varieties only to let everybody know of the heritage in the Kakheti region. In addition to traditional and well-known Sapirave and Krkatsiteli, there are other varieties as well. This is an attempt without excessive words to remind and awaken the desire of getting knowledge in the Georgian people. We are often asked if in Georgia there are more than 500 from grape varieties, why is there spread only a limited number of varieties of wines? It had its reasons. During Soviet times, the plan put the country focused on varieties with high yield only, which destroyed other varieties of the grapes. As a result, Georgia is now known only by a few wines. We intend to extend and revive all sorts. With this purpose, we have created MPL Lographic Museum.
Можно ли сказать, что Грузия должна выбрать себе...
Can we say that Georgia should choose some concrete segment to furtherly promote its wine? I mean, to refuse from mass production in favor of more quality one, the so-called boutique type. For we know that the production of wine in Europe costs much cheaper than the Georgian wine, including its transportation.
Дороже, но зато очень качественно.
I would not say so. If we take the example of the leaders of winemaking, such as Italy, France, and the countries where this tradition does not exist, such as Australia and New Zealand, it is possible to observe one thing. For example, in Italy, there are wines that are produced in small quantities and are very expensive. The same is in France. For a winemaker, top priority should be quality. The quality is not only determined by query. Low-quality wine can be made in query too. Quality is due to the diligence of a producer. Georgia should have both elite, rare wines and more diverse and affordable ones. Monastic wine is a very special niche. We are not selling name. We provide our customers with quality. The wine has a completely different character in western Georgia, east Georgia and in Kartli, made in clay pots of the same size. But this does not prevent the fact that they are all of high quality. The most important thing is what we want to give our nation and the world. I think that on any path our country must produce quality, right products that will talk for us about our country and our culture.
Продукти, რომელიც ჩვენს გარეშე ილაპარაკებს ჩვენს ქვეყანაზე, ჩვენს კულტურაზე.
Владыка Давид, скажите, вот буквально последний вопрос, это касается того, что...
And the last question. Georgia positions itself as a tourist country, and tourism is one of the main directions in the development of the country. How do you think the wine segment can affect the development of the industry? For we all know that the wine tourism is a hallmark of Georgia.
Так сказать, визитная карточка Грузии.
თვითონ ტურისტული საქმიანობა ყველა ქვეყანას
Each country carries out its tourist activities depending on its resources. In Georgia, wine tourism can become a hallmark of the country. However, I think it is wrong to develop the tourist potential of the whole country in one direction only. In particular, the Georgians have been making and consuming wine from time immemorial. It's so grown into our everyday life that if anyone is interested in the history of the wine, it should be interested in our everyday lives. In addition, our nation has erected examples of cultural heritage monastery complexes in a very attractive and interesting tourist landscape. If someone comes to study the history of wine, he cannot but enjoy our nature. Development of tourism infrastructure does not simply only hiking, eco-tourism or agricultural tourism. All this must be as complex. Together with local and foreign experts, we should be able to turn this great story in a product that will talk about all these directions. For us, the important thing is to convey the mood of our ancestors, to convey the reasons why for centuries grapes in Georgia were so precious and why it is considered a great honor to open a quarry for the dear guest. We need to show this. If we move the focus only on the visual side, it would mean that we ignore the most expensive, most valuable. We must not lose it while developing tourism. The tourism needs have deeper meanings that reflect our heritage, a heritage that has brought us to this day, the tradition of hospitality and the guest of God. Tourist infrastructure has to pass this attitude. I understand that this is quite difficult. We need people who will distribute this relationship, this mood. As for wine tourism, I think the most stable and the most important should be our attitude to quality. Quality reflects our attitude towards the issues and subjects. In this case, guests will see who we Georgians are, why we are talking at the table, why we are happy to accept guests, why we try to give them as much as possible. Tourism should be based on the essential, the quality, objectivity, humility, and our history. Then any of our business will be a success. Perhaps we, like any other nation, need friends in the country and abroad.
ამიტომაც შეთავაზება ტურიზმის ენით ჩვენი ისტორიისა უნდა იყოს ხარისხიანი, რომ ნამდვილი მეგობრები შევიძინოთ.
Большое спасибо, Владыка.
Thanks a lot for the conversation. Thank God.
Винодел – это не профессия, это искусство.
Winemaker is not a profession, but a state of mind. And when the soul is singing, the wine made by such a person is also singing.
Это первая бутылка знаменитого бренда Лагуинари. Сейчас такое вино уже не найти. Dr.
Ecoglondi, his wines are too popular, and not only in Georgia, France, Italy. Best restaurants with Michelin stars there appreciate the creation of hands and the soul of this man. And where but in famous Tbilisi Vinotel Hotel, the place where true connoisseurs of the drink of the gods are gathering, should we talk to such a person?
Здравствуйте, Эко. Спасибо большое.
Hello, Echo. Thank you so much that you have agreed to talk to us. Lots of wine experts refuse to talk about your wines objectively while they can't, but talk about them. I think this is the highest point of recognition of your wines by them. How have you succeeded to achieve such a recognition of your wines?
Что ваши вина признали.
Мне пришло сейчас на ум знаменитое интервью. Конечно, я себя не сравниваю ни с кем, да? Это знаменитое, это веховое интервью Эйнштейна, когда...
I just remembered one famous interview with Einstein. Sure, I don't compare myself to anyone, but still. So a journalist asked him, there are only two people who understand your theory. How can it be explained? On what Einstein responses, I'm still thinking who that second person is. The first crop I had in 2011, just several years ago, and I have come to the decision of starting winemaking, since I was sick and tired of drinking what I had to drink till then. I saw that those wines did not satisfy certain standards. That's why I decided to try making it myself. Perhaps my medical background has helped me with it, as well as the ability to read microchemistry and organics data and cope with biology issues. The most interesting feature in these wines is that they are natural, they are real. It was my principle, it was not a pose or something. That was really extremely important for me. Unfortunately, nowadays almost everything is called natural. Someone has grown the grape-made wine without adding any chemical additives and considers it to be natural. Well, it maybe is, but the question is what kind of quality this nature wine is. In most cases, it is something we do not even wish to taste. Being natural is not an indulgence. The aim is to approach the soil. Soil is something our diseases come from. We have the diseases our soils have. We are too dependent on what we eat and drink. There are different kinds of approaches towards the soil. We can treat it either like a living substance or something we can cram with tons of chemicals just to gain the crop as much as possible. All those fertilizers we feed the soil with are primarily salts. Just imagine that you put a pinch of salt on your tongue. You immediately wish to have some water. The same is with plants. They become full of water, and the best environment for fungal infections, and then we try to cure them. This is just as in medicine, and we cure only symptomatic of the diseases instead of dealing with the reasons that cause them. So here's the choice to make: either follow the rules or to consume all those additives and permanently visit doctors. Unfortunately, people think more of what is above the soil than of the soil itself. Maybe today I'm going to speak more about the soil than about the wine, since I consider that everything starts there. There is a kind of vicious circle. We use pesticides and herbicides. First several years we get a really paradox situation, where all plants are growing fast, we have a rich crop and everything, but therefore we kill microbiology of the soil by adding organics to it, and we kill every living object in it. This counts billions of them, for in 1 gram of a healthy soil there should live about 1 billion organisms.
Должно быть миллиард микроорганизмов. Вы понимаете, что это за цифра само по себе? И мы их убиваем.
Вот вы сейчас много говорили о том, как надо правильно относиться к почве.
You were now saying that we should treat the soil in a proper way from the point of view of science. Can we say that the lack of knowledge and the wish to get some profit immediately are the main problems of the Georgian winemaking today?
Из основных проблем грузинского виноделия на сегодняшний день.
Вы знаете что? Виноделие – это ведь комплексное хозяйство на самом деле.
You know, actually, winemaking is a complex culture, and it's quite hard to consider where there is a lack of knowledge and where they are at an adequate level. So I think it depends on the task set, and I must say that the task was determined long ago. The most complex thing is the reform. Chinese even have a proverb: curse is when your children have to live in times of big changes. And these are big changes here now. Small wine enterprises that are being increased in number now, some of them make better wine, others worse, but still they should be supported. The goal and task of a winemaker is to get a story in his glass. Wine should be able to tell us stories. Another aspect is whether you are ready to perceive the story. In order the story to happen, you should break the silence of the soil, to give it a voice, and then it would sound in your glass.
Кто-то хочет классику. Это разные вещи.
Скажите, а вот
Tell me, please, what should be done in Georgia in order, if not to level, but at least to minimize all of those problems in winemaking? Maybe we need some educational centers where future specialists would have the opportunity to study, to get prepared and learn all the nuances needed in the industry.
Ну, это тоже комплексный подход, да? Я думаю, что
Here we have also that complex approach. The government should have the main role in it. It should decide what our priority is at the moment: to get Chinese market right now, or to be able to compete with France or Spain in future. In fact, these countries have also passed such period and processes. You know, Georgia is a country with quite a rare type of soil, but situated on hill. So it's really important to set a task to calculate everything in order to know the place of your future product.
и вы получите очень конкретные ответы.
вот исходя из ваших слов, можно ли сделать вывод, что Грузия
How do you think, since Georgia is not able to compete in quantity with big and developed countries, should Georgia refuse from the mass production of wine in favor of boutique wine?
дороже, но качественного вина?
Ну, да, ответ как бы лежит на поверхности, да, там, где вы не можете конкурировать.
Well, it seems like the answer lays on the surface. Areas you can't compete in have no more value. The same is with winemaking. Actually, the problem is not Georgian, it is global one.
Лежит на поверхности, это нишевая продукция.
Многие винные эксперты говорят о неком ренессансе грузинских.
Some wine experts say about the renaissance of the Georgian wine. The fact that the country has got rid of the Soviet heritage, survived harsh 90s, and now the birth of such small enterprises seems to have brought some new stream in it. Do you agree with such an opinion?
Грузинское виноделие. Вот согласны ли вы с тем, что сейчас именно ренессанс грузинских вин?
Ну, ренессанс.
Well, it's quite hard to say. Renaissance, first of all, means knowledge. Yes, there is a very positive attempt to approach it. When we all start to think and set proper tasks and to find proper solutions to know how scientific knowledge can be applied, then we will be able to get wines that would make Georgia known throughout the world. Again, this is a process, and we can only prove the existence of all those small farms. Inevitably, we all will come to the acceptance of the fact that knowledge is indispensable indispensable in this sphere. I do not want to repeat my own mistakes. I wish to step forward to develop myself.
Тоже на самом деле. А что дальше?
Грузия славится своей древней культурой, в том числе древнейшей историей производства вина.
Georgia is famous for its ancient culture as well as for its ancient winemaking traditions. Those technologies of Quarry or Churi in western Georgia, can they possibly assist the country in occupying its proper place on the world wine market? I mean, if you make accent on these ancient technologies and culture.
Соответственно, на производство вина именно по этой технологии.
Ну, скажем так, вы опять затронули комплексную проблему. Да, там...
Once again, you have risen up a complex problem with many aspects. Sure, the Quarry technology is 8,000 years already, and the fact that it has survived till now speaks for itself. It is close to perfection, I think. Georgian tribes were one of the first society on earth. Those who settled down on Georgian territory can be called a civilization. It was an agricultural revolution. Georgians is the only nation that has no word meaning winemaking in its lexicology. Here, wine has never been made since to make wine in Georgian means to falsify it, and Georgia did not need it. The attitude towards wine in Georgia has always been as to something living one. Ancient tribes were mostly watching the nature, and the first thing they did was that they simulated the form of firewood, having made it from clay and put it into the soil. And you will see that very first artifact, I mean quarry, you will see some construction dated back to 8,000 years ago. The philosophy of the birth from clay has many times been repeated in different cultures, and the apogee of it was the story of Adam. The Georgians used quarry not only with the purpose of wine storage, but also as a burial place. Here again, the philosophy of birth and death was repeated, proving the statement about taking from dust and returning to dust. All the stories are being repeated from time to time, and yes, Georgian wine has been a real philosophy, otherwise it could have never been survived. Georgia was really a country where wine was its religion, its identity, the country where in course of the history all the invaders first of all tried to eliminate vineyards, just to destroy that culture, since they did understood that it was the only way to transform Georgia, for Georgians are the only nation survived among Indo-European nations. There was a very interesting person named William Allen. He lived in Georgia before the Red Revolution and then in 20s, 30s years of the 20th century. Then he was forgotten for some period since he supported fascist movement in Britain. But he wrote a very interesting book called A Brief History of the Georgians. And he asks there a question of how the Georgians had survived when so many nations had tried to invade them so many times. Speaking of the national feature, he used to mention aesthetic indifference. That was really so ingeniously. That very aesthetic indifference when a nation may bury 100,000 people and then in a week to sing together. Georgian tableful has always been an internal psychotherapy course. It's not easy to perceive the effect of the wine on mankind. It was indeed a mutual process. Wine had affected the nation as well as the nation had affected the wine in Georgia. Herodotus called the Georgians barbarians because they drank undiluted wine, and then he also used to say that Greek people had diluted wine not only with water but with seawater. It's not hard to imagine what taste could have had such a wine. When the Georgian sorts of grapes were taken away from Georgia to the area of the Mediterranean, the taste of those wines was of increased sweetness and of high alcohol content. Primarily, that was the reason why they used to dilute it with water. Wine was a cult for Georgians, an everyday drink, a part of culture and national identity. While Greek had to develop delirium, they needed someone to entertain them, and due to this some famous arts have appeared, like theater for instance. So I'm just talking about the great influence of wine on completely different cultures. You are asking me how Georgia should position itself on the world market. While I would ask you, what are the essential rules of selling? These are legend and quality. And the legend of winemaking in Georgia, this is something that, for example, have neither French nor Italians. Regarding the quality, here again we come across that dilemma to produce for masses or work with soil and quarry. But still, the knowledge of dealing with soil can really assist you while working with cisterns. Therefore, everything starts from the soil. Will we be able to use science for better understanding and better treatment of the soil or not?
Неоднозначный, наверное, на ваш ответ. Я не знаю, насколько вас это удовлетворяет, но действительно сложно.
Большое спасибо.
Thanks a lot, Echo, for this interesting conversation. We can talk much, and we are going to come back to this very important topic for Georgia. In the meantime, it is worth remembering, quality combined with the historical heritage could be one of the most powerful engines of the economy that will allow conscientious winemaker earn good money.